Hello and welcome to Film du Siècle, the film and media channel focused on all things 90s and 2000s. This week, Seb and Olly will be discussing The Mummy.
Hello and welcome to Film du Siècle, the film and discussion channel where we look at all things 1990s to 2000. We have a spooky Halloween themed month, don't we, Ollie?
Yeah. Well, sort of.
I mean, it is October, so what do you expect?
Yeah.
What's the first movie we will be looking at in the most spooky month of October?
Well, first of all, I don't think I'd call any of these films horror films per se, but
No.
it's an old favourite of mine. The Mummy, 1999, the Stephen Sommers one with Brendan Fraser in it.
Yes, good old Brendan Fraser. I love that guy, and I wish he had more of a career today.
Yeah, I mean, he used to be everywhere.
I know.
Obviously, the details as to why he no longer is are very unfortunate.
At least he's got the nut job.
He'll always have.
Yeah, and the many sequels that seems to churn out. I remember being very surprised seeing a poster for the nut job too. I didn't think the first one did terribly well, but apparently that is his big franchise now.
Really?
Well, it's the big franchises associated with what he did, the Mummy franchise. Oh, George of the Jungle, although that was just one movie. I think they teased a bit of a sequel, but it never happened. What else? Looney Tunes, I suppose, in a way, but he only really appeared in that one movie that they did back in action.
Yeah, I remember that. There was Journey to the Centre of the Earth as well.
Was that? I suppose that was a franchise, because wasn't it like a remake of an old, 60s movie?
Yeah. And he did Encino Man, which was released as California Man here.
I like how they did the reverse of what they did with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because they're like, oh, they won't know what that word means, just say California, they know it's an American thing.
Like, a film I very much enjoyed Brendan Fraser in that we may cover on this channel once was Bedazzled.
Oh, wait, is that the one where he's a male stripper, or am I completely wrong?
You may be completely wrong. It's the film...
Yeah, that long pause suggested I was completely wrong.
It's the film where Elizabeth Hurley is the devil and he sells his soul for 7 wishes and they all go like monkeys paw wrong.
So basically it's just real life.
Possibly.
Oh dear. But yeah, I remember liking this film. I've only seen it a couple of times and not recently. That's the one where it's got Omid Jalili, hasn't it?
Yeah, this one has Omid Jalili in it. This was one of my favourite... this was my favourite film for a long time as a kid.
It's an understandable one. I mean, it's more like a fun, child-friendly kind of Indiana Jones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I genuinely believe that there is no recapturing Indiana Jones, but this film comes about as close as any film had.
Well, yeah, there is no recapturing Indiana Jones, as the Nazis in The Last Crusade found out the hard way.
No, he's still out there.
Not that Jones, the other Jones. Oh, dear.
But yeah, it's been a while since I saw this film. I'm very much looking forward to watching it again because...
Me too.
Oh,
I remember it being an absolute joy at the time.
Yeah. Also, John Hannah, who
yes.
we've since seen in other things like Spartacus, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I think he was in Atlantis, although I never saw that.
No, I never saw that.
And also, A Touch of Cloth.
Oh, yes.
John Hannah is brilliant.
Yes, for Charlie Brooker comedy.
Yeah, and the other stuff I've seen him in has made me appreciate him a whole lot more. So I'm looking forward to seeing this film with that context. Yeah,
I suppose you could liken him to a lot less dramatic Peter Capaldi. So, Peter Capaldi without all the melodrama with a bit less swearing.
I was going to do this, fan casting of a live-action Dragon Ball movie for my YouTube channel. I still might.
Ah.
And I had cast John Hannah as Commander Red of the Red Ribbon Army.
Ah, very good, very good.
And, Peter Capaldi was going to be Dr. Giraud.
Yes, what are all these people doing these days? Because... honestly, it's so sad we're not seeing Brendan Fraser in movies, and it's quite sad we're not really seeing John Hannah in much.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent about. Yeah.
It's film de siècle. It is expected of us to some degree.
Yeah. What are all these people doing these days? Well, Brendan Fraser had a very rough time of it.
Yeah.
It's not good. But he seems to be all
On
right
the
in
uppers.
himself, as they say
Yes.
now. Which is good. John Hannah had Spartacus, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and A Touch of Cloth and a lot of other things, as I said.
So he's done all right for himself.
Yeah. I don't really know where I've seen anyone else in that movie. Rachel Weisz was in Oz the Great and Powerful.
Yeah.
And before that, she voiced the dragon in Eragon.
Yes. And for some reason, she's most well known today for marrying Daniel Craig, which is a shame because she's quite good in her own right.
No, she's a terrific actress.
Yes.
But, let's see. Oded Fair, I remember seeing one other time, but I don't know what film it was. It was on TV. My brother was watching it. And it was about this guy who I think was on holiday, and he made friends with this local who had a really fancy house and collected weapons, and Oded Fair played that weapon collector guy who asked him to look after his house.
Oh.
And of course he immediately trashed it. And I didn't see the...
It's basically Chekhov's house if it's containing lots of weapons.
And I didn't see the end of the film, but I'm positive it was him.
Yeah, very well might have been. I don't have particularly strong feelings remembering back because it's been so long since I last saw this, so I'm looking forward to watching this. Shall we stick it on?
Yes, let's.
Yeah. Okay, see you in a minute.
See ya.
And we're back in the room.
Oh god, that was nostalgic.
Yeah, I'd like to say it was, but I watched it once about 20 years ago and I've not seen it since. There were like 3 or 4 moments that I remember from it out of context. But yeah, watching the whole movie was sure an experience. I loved every moment of it.
There was a point in my life when I was like, well, it was soon after it came out on video, that I would watch it daily.
Yeah, well, I can't blame you. It's one of those. But to answer question 1, I think we both enjoyed this movie.
Oh, yes. It was a lot of fun to revisit.
Yeah, and I liked all the characters. I mean, we're going to go into this more a bit later, but I liked each and every one of them for different reasons.
Yeah, there was not an unremarkable character in there.
No, it was all pretty impressive. I like how Egypt looked at the beginning. I mean, it was probably a lot more mundane in real life at the time, ancient Egypt.
Yeah, I also doubt the Sphinx was directly in front of the Pyramid of Giza.
No, I mean, the pyramids were probably... Well, of course the pyramids were there, but it probably wasn't much more exciting than that. It probably looks like it does today, except instead of tour buses, there would have been some huts about. That's the difference here. But yeah, I liked the gold people in the beginning. They're like the Knights of Ren, except if they're in an advert for Ferrero Rocher.
What? Imhotep's priests?
Yeah, and they also looked a bit like the guys you'd meet at the pub in EastEnders or something like that. You know, their bald heads and their gruff faces. And gotta love that 90s CGI, haven't you?
The Knights of Ren from a Ferrero Rocher advert.
Yeah. So,
the Knights of Rocher.
The Knights of Rocher. They even did... Well, they didn't do it, but there was even a bit where they were standing on top of a hill and it looked a bit like that bit in Rise of Skywalker where the Knights of Ren were stood on the hill.
No, that was the bodyguards, the Magi.
That's the ones. I liked them. Although, I can't help but think that if they went there to negotiate instead of arbitrarily killing the people who were doing the excavation, they would have got a lot further. Because they even said, look, we're not here to fight anybody, we just want you to leave. Like, yeah, you could have explained that instead of, like, shooting at people for no reason.
Yeah, send an emissary down there and say, look, the thing is, we're an ancient society that protects this city, and we can't have you digging here. So, we're going to need you to clear off, or we're going to have to kill you all.
But the thing is, we are archaeologists. This is just what we do.
Well, yes, I dare say that is the impasse we've arrived at. But you see...
And there's no other places around here we can do the archaeology, because they've already done the pyramids, that's already sorted. And we found this place, and there's like loads of stuff we can find. So, you know, unless you can find us another place to be archaeologists...
Well, I can appreciate your problem, but it is your problem, not ours. And we are going to kill you if you don't leave. So...
Well, that's a bit impolite, don't you think?
Well, maybe so, but...
Also, I love the Lord of the Rings levels of exposition in the beginning with the whole flashback story and voice.
Yeah, by Oded Fair.
That's a good bit of fun.
It was Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo was the film I mentioned I'd seen him in. I looked it up.
Yeah, because he was kind of like Right Said Fred, but scary. I'm too sexy for my life. I'm too sexy for my locusts.
Oh, God, the locusts. Oh.
But what was the whole deal in the beginning? Because there's the whole fight with Brendan Fraser fighting like the nationally confused Arab people. I don't know what they are.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be armies fighting over the land, but I don't know the nature of the conflict. I know from the making of that I watched years ago that the army Brendan Fraser is in is the French Foreign Legion.
Which is sort of weird considering they're in the middle of Egypt, which at the time was a British protectorate. With some degree of autonomy. You'd think that they'd have some sort of issue with, like, a French army by the pyramids.
Yeah, I'd imagine they would.
Yeah, but what's that about? Our hero, ladies and gentlemen, he shot horses, he was lucky to survive, and then he gets scared by a statue.
Yeah.
Also, they used one of the most ineffective tropes in film, which is the whole, let him go, the desert will kill him, which is sort of what they did in Holes. And in real life, that would almost always work. But in the narrative of film, there's always some sort of out to it, and I like how they don't even bother showing us how he survived in the desert.
No, we're just, he managed it.
They got bored of their own plot device the moment they made it.
But that's the thing, you can forgive them for thinking it'll be alright to just leave him to it. Because in real life, that would work.
Yeah, but in the medium of film, there is always some sort of plot armour, like, I don't know, an Oasis or God's Thumb.
Yeah.
Do you know what else I enjoyed today?
What?
The heroine. I also liked the female protagonist of this movie.
Oh, you beat me by 1 second. And Rachel Weisz wasn't bad either.
Yeah, I mean, she was looking very un-Rachel Weisz. I mean, I don't know. I didn't realise it was her at first.
Was she?
I don't know.
It must have.
She looks a lot different in James Bond.
It must have been the hair. Like she has her hair up for a good amount of this film.
Yeah, her hair was very un-Weisz.
She had the stereotypical Hollywood bookish girl kind of librarian look.
Look, she's took off her glasses. She's not a nerd. She's beautiful.
Yeah.
But in this movie, she's basically Belle if she was Jar Jar Binks.
Well, she's only clumsy that once.
That's the weird thing. It's not a character trait. It doesn't come up again. She accidentally knocks over the bookshelves in a perfect domino pattern, and her clumsiness never comes up again, at least with the Phantom Menace. They have Jar Jar Binks' clumsiness come up again, like he accidentally nudges all the droids and makes them shoot into each other, and his clumsiness helps them win the battle.
I mean, in fairness, her knocking over the bookshelves would not have happened if they hadn't been arranged exactly like that.
Yeah, why did they arrange them exactly like that? Or was it some sort of party trick?
I don't know.
Also...
But yeah, it also introduces us to the Egyptologist character, the curator.
Mr. Prescott!
Yeah, from Home Alone
4.
4, was that?
Yeah, there's a bit of history there. It's just because that guy, Mr. Prescott, was probably the standout character in Home Alone 4, which is a direct-to-video, terrible sequel to the Home Alone movies.
He also played Chandra Suresh in Heroes.
Yeah, he's one of those actors who pops up in so many different things over and over again. He's so good. But what I like about him is he could pass for any nationality or ethnicity. I mean, I've seen this man play Indians, I've seen him play Middle Eastern people, I've seen him play English people. He's a magical man, Ollie.
Well, like Patrick Stewart, he just looks exactly the same all the time.
Yeah, but he could play like half the world. Well, he looks like he could be anything.
He just looks vaguely ethnic to Hollywood producers.
Yeah, so exactly, he is vaguely ethnic. He could pass for most ethnicities. But he's not ethnic in any particular direction, which would preclude him from a lot of roles. He could be an Indian man if he wanted, and he was in Heroes. I don't know what he was in Home Alone. I think he was just sort of a British butler.
Yeah, he was.
But
I do remember.
That range and variety, he is blessed. And also, he hasn't aged in 20 years.
Yeah, if you saw him today, I reckon you'd recognise him from any of the films you might happen to have seen him in, no matter how long ago it was.
And John Hannah also played the the brother of Rachel Weisz.
Yeah, Jonathan. I love that character.
Also, it's so weird hearing him be, English rather than Scottish.
Well, his Scottish accent does slip occasionally. Like when he's saying to Winston, well, everyone else we've bumped into has died, why not you? That sounds a little bit Scottish.
Could have fooled me, though, for the most part.
Well, I was listening for it, to be fair.
Yeah, you were wanting to hear it. You wanted the Scottishness.
Yeah. But I do love that character. I think what we've got there is someone with a bit of PTSD. Because he looks about 30, right?
Yeah.
And the film is in the 1920s, so would he have been conscripted into World War One?
Well, is it the early 20s or the late 20s? Because he could have been around for the tail end of it, I guess.
I'm gonna check.
Also, if he's British, he could have seen some sort of service in the 20s, because there are all sorts of minor conflicts all over the world at that point.
Yeah, I think he might have, because, and I'm gonna...
You're presenting a fan theory.
Yeah. When we first meet him, he jokes about wishing he was dead sometimes.
Yeah, that's a bit of a weird thing to joke about.
Yeah, and he's got a black sense of humour.
Well, the first thing we see of him is hiding inside a mummified corpse and then jumping out.
Yeah, to scare his sister.
Yeah, which was a funny little fake out at the beginning, because, let's face it, in the first 5 minutes the corpses are going to come to life. They're not going to save that for later on in the movie.
And also, he's a decent shot.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
You see that bit where the Magi attack the campsite, and he's got that stolen bottle of scotch that he took from Omid Jalili.
He's already a bit drunk.
Yeah, he's already a bit drunk, and he just shoots a guy off a horse. He doesn't really bat that much of an eye at it. Like, he's no stranger to this. And even on the boat, where he's seen as a bit of a coward, I guess, in his demeanour, he's less scared than you'd expect an average person to be.
Yeah, I mean, on a flaming boat, it's hard to keep your composure, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'd say he manages it all right. So I think we've got, someone struggling with a bit of PTSD there.
Yeah, I mean, also, we've got the whole brother-sister dynamic. It's very Katara and Sokka from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Elaborate.
Well...
1926.
Okay, well, that's 8 years after the end of the First World War, so quite possible that he was in the army and saw service in the First World War.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, that theory holds some water. But to elaborate, you've got the sort of goofy, comic relief, quite helpful, actually, brother, and the sensible, knowledgeable sister who are going on an adventure with a new guy who they found after being lost for a while, and the new guy ends up forming a romantic attachment to the sister.
Okay, some of that is a bit of a stretch, but I can definitely see where you can make that connection.
Does that make Omid Jalili Momo? Omid Jalili is good in this.
Yeah, he is. I mean, it's probably the biggest part I've ever seen him get.
Why isn't this man in more movies? He's a well-known stand-up comedian in the UK, but why hasn't this man's career just gone to the moon?
No, he deserves to. He deserves more movie roles.
Yeah, he's so good. I mean, he's great at being funny. He's great at being a little bit shady. I really liked him in this. Very good.
Yeah.
What other characters haven't we mentioned yet? We haven't mentioned Fez Gollum.
Fez Gollum? Well, Benny.
Yeah, that's what I call him, just because he wears a fez and he serves the Gollum part in the story where he's basically a foil to them.
Yeah, he pops in and out to ruin things.
Yeah, basically. And he ends up...
The actor, that's how he described the character on the making of. He said Benny sort of pops in and pops out to ruin any scene he's a part of.
And he's so great to despise because he's such a slimy, self-serving, self-interested character.
Yeah. One of my favourite parts of the entire movie is that bit where Rick corners him in the room, and as he tries to run away, he just picks up a chair and just... well... He just yeets the chair into his back.
He's the chair yeeter. I liked the American guy who very obviously died, and he was going to, the not Jamie Lannister looking guy.
Right. Anderson, I think his name was.
Yeah, I liked him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the villain of the piece.
Yeah, Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep.
Very good. He's basically evil Right Said Fred.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at him. He's bald and you can imagine wearing a bit of, makeup, couldn't you?
I could.
Yeah, but he's also an intimidating presence, and he's at his scariest when you don't see much of him.
Yeah. I think the scariest looking he ever gets was after his, third draining, if you like. Where
that's not a euphemism.
It could well be one, but in this case it isn't. But basically, he's just killed the Egyptologist, and his skin is taking on a much whiter hue, and this is the bit where he barks locusts at them.
Yes, he's a locust eater.
Yeah.
So, all in all, we did both enjoy that movie.
Yeah. And, another thing I really like about Rick as a character is, he is seen at the beginning very much as kind of a brute.
Yeah.
But he's not really. He's definitely not a chauvinist, as you'd expect, because he doesn't presume to take charge just because Evie's a woman, and doesn't doubt her capabilities based on that fact, which the Egyptologist expressly does.
Exactly, yes.
When Anderson says, "Do they know something we don't?" he replies, "They're led by a woman. What does a woman know?"
Yeah, because he's the bad guy. We need to make sure we know that.
Yeah. And that doesn't even occur to Rick. He takes charge when the situation calls for his skill set, which is combat.
Yeah, which is spontaneous chaos and guiding your way through that. Yeah. Whereas when there's an archaeology thing coming up, he knows that Evie knows a lot more on the subject than he does.
Yeah, he defers to her without any kind of resistance. And that's nice, because you could so easily have had the, idiotic meathead who thinks he knows better than a girl kind of thing. And I'm really glad they didn't go that way, because not only have we seen that a million times, it's just not very good.
Yeah, but they do this very well. Very well.
Yeah.
Okay, Ollie, how well did the film achieve its goals, and what were they?
Well, that depends on what you think those goals were. If you want to see its goal as being a remake of the 1932 Boris Karloff film, The Mummy, it's not a very good remake of that. But if you if you take it as a separate piece of cinema, it's bloody good.
Yeah.
I would say, the whole Indiana Jones kind of feel.
I know of it.
I would say that this is probably the film, at least as far as I know, that comes closest to achieving that without actually being an Indiana Jones movie.
Yes, and it's shot quite similarly, and it's also got the Lucas-style fade cuts, which I quite liked.
Yeah, there's a few screen wipe transitions.
Yeah, very Lucas-esque. And I like a few of
them. Oh, you mentioned really liking that transition where they open the map.
Yeah, they open the map, and then as they open the map, it instantly transitions into them looking at the map in the office. It was very Edgar Wright in its style.
Yeah.
They kept the kinetic energy going. There was no time wasted from one scene into another. It was perfect, actually.
Yeah. And, the way the screen wipe transition comes when he jumps down into the pit and it transitions into the darker room.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah, this movie has some really good editing and pacing and transitions. It's a very well-paced movie. It didn't really feel like it dragged at any point, and it didn't feel like it was moving too fast to follow either. But plot isn't that complicated.
There are a few gaps in it, but none that matter too much. Like, we don't know how Rick survived the desert, but how he survived the desert isn't important.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
Just that he did. Yeah.
I mean, also another thing that I like is they subvert the whole, oh, well, there's nothing supernatural going on here thing, like you had with Indiana Jones, by having the main character be the one who knows that there's some really bad shit going down, and him having to be the one to convince everyone else.
Yeah.
That was a good role reversal there, and I really liked that.
Yeah. There's a good contrast between the characters there, because I remember you pointing this out. The bit on the boat where he first unravels his toolkit to reveal all the guns.
Again, not a euphemism.
Yeah.
Take a look at my toolkit, love.
And guns?
And guns? Carry on.
Evie's just interested in the Book of the Dead as an artifact. Yeah. Rick is a bit superstitious about it.
Well, he saw the scary face in the desert in the beginning.
Yeah. Like, he doesn't quite know that he believes in all the curses and stuff, but he knows there's something bad out there.
Yeah.
And he says as much. He says there's something underneath that sand, and when she asks what he thinks it was, he says, in a word, evil.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, the level of superstition he has isn't clear, but he's not closed-minded about it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But in terms of its goals, I suppose how you could compare it to the original is both movies were very pioneering and probably were very good showcases of new filmmaking techniques and technology at that time. For example, there were probably a lot of prosthetics advancements at the time for the Boris Karloff movie, whereas for this one, you're showcasing a lot of CGI, which was very new technology. I mean, the only movie before this that I can think of, before 1999, that had a huge reliance on CGI, not counting Toy Story, which isn't meant to look photorealistic. Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
You could probably say is the first big movie that heavily relied on CGI for its world building and had no real suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the CGI in this film is pretty dated.
It was probably amazing for its time.
It was.
It kind of works half the time. I mean, the mummy himself, when he's sort of decomposed and walking around, doesn't look terrible. He just doesn't really have the fear factor that you need from the main villain, the main boogeyman monster of the movie.
I think less is more in that regard. Like, when that bit where he's mostly regenerated, but his mouth is still corpsey.
Yeah.
I think that was probably scarier than when he was just a gooey corpse.
Exactly, because when she reads from the book and then he comes to life, it probably would have been better if we didn't see that, because it was very fake and CGI. Whereas if we just saw like a quick twitch of a finger or something like that from the corpse, then that would have been enough, I think. And it would have made it all the more surprising when you sort of see him in the shadow. No, you see him from a view of the visually impaired man who stepped on his glasses. And the brilliant thing about that is we don't see the whole thing.
Yeah.
But that brilliant effect and that brilliant idea is sort of undercut by the fact that we've already seen the mummy in broad daylight.
Yeah, this is true.
If it weren't for that, that scene would have been 10 times more effective.
Absolutely. I still really like this film. It's not, strictly speaking, a horror film, though.
No.
It's an adventure movie. So I think you can forgive a bit of cheesiness there.
Yeah, it's an adventure movie with a horror aesthetic. I think a good example to compare it to is the Wampa from Empire Strikes Back. Because a lot of people say that it was a lot scarier when you just saw its arm and the implication of the creature being there. Whereas later on, although it looks a lot more impressive because 10 or so years have passed since the special edition. Yeah. In the special edition, you see the full Wampa, and it doesn't really have the same impact or fear factor that it did in Empire Strikes Back, unedited.
Yeah, true.
Sometimes the creature being implied is enough.
Yeah.
And I just would have liked to have seen a bit less of the mummy in the mummy.
Or at least until everyone knows what's going on, the suspense is
up. Then you can show him to your heart's content, which they do later anyway.
Yeah.
I quite like how they say he does not eat, he does not sleep, he does not stop. And then the next scene you see him in, he's sitting on a chair.
Yeah, he's just
chilling. He's
sitting in a chair, having Benny chat to Mr. Burns, which is his name.
Yeah.
Who obviously can't see because he's got his eyes. That's one thing that I always wondered. Like, is the mummy visually impaired?
Well, he
because
was when
he took the eyes of someone who is.
Good point, actually, because that's a big plot hole. Because he didn't take healthy eyes.
I mean, there's no way that was a surgical transplant of the eyes, so maybe he magically regenerated his own eyes from taking his.
Well, according to Naruto, that's enough, because the Uchiha can, like, grab the eyes out of somebody and put them in their own face.
Somehow I doubt Masashi Kishimoto really did his research on that bit in terms of medical textbooks.
No, I don't think that man has ever been to medical school. The astigmatic mummy. Watch him as he gropes about. Do you think that's why mummies grope about in fiction? Because they can't see where they're going. Like, oh, where are you?
That would explain the outstretched hand.
Because that can't be good for when your muscles are half decomposed.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be best keeping them at your waist and just taking steps carefully instead of your arms upsetting you.
I don't think we're supposed to really think about it, but I think Imhotep would probably be a lot less scary if he couldn't see without his glasses.
Maybe he got contact lenses off screen. Can you imagine giving the mummy an eye test? Better or worse? Okay then. Better or worse? Better. Oh dear. So, assuming that it was a nice 90s era showcase of spectacle, I think it achieved its goals fairly well at the time. It was a great adventure movie. Was it successful in the cinema? Let me find out for you. The Mother.
The Mother.
Alright, The Mummy cost $80 million to make and made $416.4 million, so it achieved its goal of making a lot of money.
Wow, it cost almost as much as Bicentennial Man.
Yeah, and let's face it launched Rachel Weisz into stardom. It launched John Hannah into stardom. It launched Brendan Fraser into mediocrity.
Now, hang on. Brendan Fraser was already quite established at that time, I think.
What had he been in beforehand?
George of the Jungle, I think, was before. I think so.
Yeah, because that explains why his hair's so long in this. Because obviously if he's just come off the back of that or he's just about to film that, then he's going to want to keep his hair fairly long. Because men in the 20s didn't have particularly long hair. But yes, to answer question 2, we think it achieves its roles quite well.
I mean, it made a lot of money. It was a bad remake of the Boris Karloff version, but it was a perfectly serviceable schlock horror action movie. It was also
probably a good equivalent of what the Boris Karloff movie was in its own time.
Well, I don't know about that. I think I'll have to watch the Boris Karloff version again to tell you that. But
it's its own thing. It's a mummy for a new time. And because of the dated CGI, you can see why there was the temptation to remake The Mummy in the 2010s.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say it was too soon, but considering it was a movie of spectacle and adventure...
I don't think the timing was the issue. They had started production on The Mummy 4 before they decided to reboot it. I still want an original cast Mummy 4. Like... They could still make it, and I want them to.
Yeah, I'd pay to see that.
Even though The Mummy 3 wasn't great.
Yeah.
I mean, I still enjoyed it. It just wasn't anywhere near as good as the first two.
Well, perhaps we'll watch those at another point. Did the movie exceed your expectations?
I think I was way too familiar with it for it to do that, to be honest, for the purpose of this video. When I first saw it, it did. Like, I didn't expect to like it when it was on TV as a kid, but that was what my dad and my brother were watching in the living room, and so... So
you had to go along with that?
Yeah, but I'm glad I did, because I very much enjoyed that film.
Yeah!
That was the first time I saw it. I saw it on TV.
That was the first and probably only time I've seen it until now. I think I've only seen it the once, so I have the exact opposite issue of you, whereas I have no expectations because it's honestly not been on my mind for a very long time. But I liked what I saw. I enjoyed it. It was very interesting. I liked all the characters. It was an entertaining time, and I'm not sad I watched this.
No. And, well, it's an old favourite of mine, so I'm always glad to revisit it.
Yeah, I felt like I got exactly what I wanted out of it, so I'm pretty happy.
Yeah.
Is there an element in the film that particularly appeals?
Well, there must have been, because I friggin' loved it as a kid. I like the whole Stephen Sommers feel. Van Helsing had quite a similar feel to it. It's a fun action romp with a horror aesthetic.
Yeah,
I love that
I like
shit.
the atmosphere it provides. I like how much personality each character has. I mean, even the minor characters have a lot of personality.
It's a really charming film. Well, I've made the Indiana Jones comparison, and I like those movies.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the small characters, like the pilot, who is only in it for a few... He has his character arc, which is basically he wants to die because his life has no purpose. He finds purpose in his life by flying them on this mission, and then he dies, and that is it. And he sinks slowly into the sand, Terminator 2 style.
Yeah, and he's like a comic relief character.
Talking about wanting to die. Very comic relief.
Yeah, and he's so blind drunk, he steps into a fountain and says, "Some bloody idiot spilled his drink."
I like that character, Winston. He was good. And I like that they took a tiger moth. They tried to make it look like a DH-4 aircraft, which would have been quite common at the time.
Yeah.
They did their best. They put a lot of effort into this movie. I'm sure that the weapons and stuff are representative of what would have been around. Because they had those guns where you have to press the thing on the top. Oh, I don't know what you call them.
Cylinder.
You know, the American
I don't know.
ones with the cylinders where you have to go on top.
I don't know what they're called.
But imagine me on Porn Stars. You know, the show.
No, I know what you meant.
It's like, yeah, this is a shooty boy from the 1947 movie starring John Wayne. This is the triggery thing, and this is the blowy uppy. But I like the increasingly antagonistic friend talk that was going on during one of the tomb scenes between the American guys and the main characters. Like,
oh yeah,
yeah, well this
here's our statue, friend. I don't see your name on it, pal. I'm not your buddy, guy. I'm not your guy,
I want to
friend.
start doing that in real life to anybody who antagonises me. It's just so sarcastic and brilliant.
Well, you can just go fuck yourself, mate.
Brilliant. What was with that acid booby trap?
Pressurized salt acid, Rick said. Apparently it's an ancient booby trap. I cannot confirm that or deny.
Yeah. Also, was there some sort of fake out with the bottle?
Oh, yeah. Because Omid Jalili had just been killed by a scarab beetle. And he put some in his bag when they were still... blue gold, as he put it. And John Hannah was rooting through his bag, and the music was ominous, and he went, "Ah!" And it was just a broken bottle.
I feel bad about Omid Jalili's character being killed off 45 minutes in. That kind of sucks. He could have been like the Iago of this franchise.
The what?
Iago, you know, the parrot from Aladdin. Iago, whatever he is.
Iago.
He, all I know is he was played by Gilbert Gottfried. That one.
Well, he fulfilled a similar role.
Yeah, he could have been like an ongoing comic relief. I know they sort of already had John Hannah for that, but I don't know, Omid Jalili just did it for me in this movie.
Yeah.
So, the elements in this film that particularly appeals, I would have to say the acting, the characters, and the world they built.
Yeah. And, what practical effects were there were good.
Yeah, I feel like they should have done more practical and less CGI, but you can see why they wanted to play with their new toys. It was the 90s.
Well, the city collapsing sequence was quite a good one.
Yeah, that was impressive. Anything with a lot of sand was quite impressive.
Oh, I quite like the Magi as... Well, they start as a petty antagonistic force. Well, not really. They start as an antagonistic force, and then you learn why. And it turns out... No, we were trying to kill you, yes, but it was to stop the world ending.
Yeah.
Which...
They had very good reasons for their actions, although I wish they were more upfront about it to begin with.
And, well, Evie says to the curator, you think this justifies the killing of innocent people? To stop this creature? Let me think. And they both go, yes!
Yes, I liked that. Very good. I love the dialogue in this film. I also liked the one guy who survived.
The one guy? Oh.
Yeah, the one with the tattoos on his face.
Oh, yeah, Ardeth, his name is, Oded Fair. Although I don't think he's actually named in the film.
Yeah, I was kind of sad when he died, because he had red shirt written all over him. There's a lot of red shirts in this movie who are going to die. It's like when the American...
And that's another person, we don't know how he survived.
It's like when there was the American Jamie Lannister guy. That scene when he's sitting in the hotel, I was like, can you go downstairs and get me a drink? I was just going, he's going to die, he's going to die, he's going to die. And you're going, yep, it's not a spoiler if it's obvious. And then he died.
Yeah.
It's predictable, but that doesn't make it bad. It's just, it ticks all the storytelling boxes.
Yeah. And the bit where he turns himself into sand to go through the door.
Yeah, we're talking about the mummy himself.
That was a good effect.
Anyone else?
Yeah, not
Brendan Fraser.
Although, that would be a turn up for a sequel. It's like...
He didn't go anywhere near that reactor from Spider-Man 3.
No.
So, Ollie, how do you think this film holds up today?
I still like it, but then I'm very nostalgic. So...
Obviously, it looks dated. In spirit, though, it's just as good then as it is now, I think.
Well, they don't really make films like this anymore with that kind of tone.
Well, it's because they use computers past Windows 98 now.
Well, no, I don't mean the CGI. I mean, the atmosphere that this film has. I don't know who the composer was, and I think I should because I really like the soundtrack.
The composer was Jerry Goldsmith.
Ah.
Who worked on the first 5 films of the Star Trek franchise, as well as the Rambo franchise, Planet of the Apes, Logan's Run, Patton, and Chinatown. So...
Oh, quite a decorated career then. The soundtrack really did add to the atmosphere. I think it was a fun atmosphere. And, well, the dialogue was charming, but not in an obnoxious way.
It was very snappy, and it sticks in your mind. It's like blue gold, which will fetch a fine value. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the back and forths were witty, but not in the way that makes you feel like they were trying to be clever.
Yeah, there's no pretentiousness to this movie whatsoever. It's just in it for a bit of fun, and so are we.
It knows what it is, and I love that.
Yeah, it doesn't try to be groundbreaking, although when they do break the ground, that is visually impressive.
Yeah.
So I think it holds up pretty well. I would recommend this to anybody of today. I would recommend it to the millennials who say, look past the dated CGI and you'll have quite an entertaining film for you.
Yeah, I would agree, yeah.
And the funny thing is about these, I suppose you could call them period dramas, is because of that, they don't really feel dated because it's not a time most people were alive for. I suppose there would have been some 80-year-olds in the audience going, oh yes, I remember Cairo back then. But other than niches, it's not really something where you'd think, oh, that feels very dated.
Yeah.
It's long enough to be timeless.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment.
So, care to surmise, Ollie?
Well, I really like this film. It was my favourite film for a good long while as a kid, and I'm very nostalgic for it. It was good to watch it again. It gave me nice nostalgic feels.
I also liked that the mummy was afraid of a cat and that only came up twice. They should have kept the cat with them.
Well, they did. Rick took it with him, didn't he?
It was like Captain Marvel. Being afraid of the cat.
Well, there were reasons for that. Cats are the guardians of the underworld, apparently, and until he's fully regenerated, he'll be scared of them. That was the whole thing.
I'd quite like to see a mummy movie that's anticlimactic, where the mummy doesn't want revenge on anyone, he doesn't want to unleash plagues, he just wants to get into a normal life and reintegrate himself into society. You see him trying to learn the modern day English. You see him in the office, with his job. He's decomposing a bit, but they put up with it because, he's different and...
The Mummy 4, how Imhotep got his groove back.
Yes! Sorry about that, my vocal cords are disintegrating. Can you repeat that? Just he wants to get a job. I mean, the Mummy also seems to be a bit anti-Semitic. It's like, the guy who goes through all the different faiths, and then he eventually comes to
Benny.
Yeah, Benny, and then he eventually gets to the faith of Judaism to try and ward off the creature, and he's like, oh, you're the people of my slaves. And then he tries to tempt him over with gold. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, he does recruit him, but I think it's more of a self-preservation thing than a gold thing.
Yeah, because later on when Ben is escaping, he is sensible enough to dump the gold. I thought they'd do something cheesy, like he could escape, but because he's going back after the gold, he dies. I'm glad they avoided that
even then,
cliche.
Rick tries to pull him through. Like, he holds his hand out going, come on, Benny. And only when it's obvious that it's not going to work does he pull his hand back.
I love that scene because he's the heroic person. He tries to help him, but he's also not too sad that he couldn't in the end, which is kind of realistic.
Well, yeah, I mean, Benny had it coming.
Yeah, he lost those. Although, having said that, I don't think that the punishment fit the crime.
He ran away in the battle at the beginning and then shot him out of the shelter and left him for dead. Yeah.
But did he deserve to be eaten alive?
No, I think at least he died quickly.
Yeah, he's a lot like Boris from GoldenEye, isn't he? He's really unpleasant and scheming, and then he gets a really gruesome death at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if I'm to surmise, I'd say I'm really glad I watched it. I don't know why I haven't rewatched it sooner. I recommend it to anyone watching.
Oh, you mentioned Benny going through all the religions. That was something I found really funny the first time I saw it. It's like...
That sums up the character perfectly. He has no allegiance other than to himself.
Yeah, and he will pray to whatever god he thinks he has to save him.
Yes, he even had Buddhism. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Film du Siècle. We've enjoyed watching this film.
Yeah. What did you think of The Mummy? Tell us some of your nostalgic memories in the comments.
Yes, we would love to read them.
Favourite scenes?
And if you disagree with us, we will just simply discard those views. Nah, just joking, we'll enjoy reading.
Oh, this was fun. I've enjoyed watching that movie and talking about it.
As have I. See you next week, dear child.
See you next week.
Bye.